In the heart of Europe, a conference took place that would change the fate of a continent. This was not just any ordinary meeting, it was a gathering of immense significance. From November 15, 1884 to February 26, 1885, 14 nations convened in Berlin. These nations included major European powers such as Britain, France, Germany and Belgium, among others, their mission to divide the African continent among themselves. This division was not just about drawing lines on a map, it was about control, power and exploitation. This event, known as the Berlin Conference, marked a turning point in African history. It was the beginning of a new era, one that would see the continent's resources and people subjected to foreign rule. It unleashed a wave of colonialism that would leave a lasting impact on the continent. The decisions made in those conference rooms would echo through the decades, shaping the future of Africa in profound ways. Before the conference, European presence in Africa was limited to coastal areas. These coastal enclaves were primarily used for trade, including the infamous transatlantic slave trade. The interior of the continent, home to diverse cultures and kingdoms, remained largely unexplored by Europeans. These regions were rich in natural resources and had complex social structures and vibrant cultures. The Berlin Conference changed all that. The agreements made there opened the floodgates for European exploration and exploitation of the African interior. Driven by economic greed and political ambition, European powers embarked on a race to claim African territories. They sent explorers, soldiers and settlers to establish control over vast areas, often with little regard for the existing African societies. The imposition of colonial rule was met with resistance from many African communities. Leaders and warriors rose to defend their lands and way of life, but the technological and military superiority of the Europeans often proved overwhelming. The colonial powers built infrastructure to extract resources, using forced labor and exploiting local populations. Railways, roads and ports were constructed, not for the benefit of Africans, but to facilitate the export of raw materials to Europe. Despite the harsh realities of colonial rule, African cultures and traditions persisted. The resilience of the people ensured that their heritage was not entirely erased, even as they faced immense challenges. The legacy of the Berlin Conference continued to influence Africa well into the 20th century. The arbitrary borders drawn by the colonizers sowed seeds of conflict, but they also sparked movements for independence and self-determination. Today, the impact of that fateful gathering in Berlin is still felt across the continent. Modern African nations continue to navigate the complex legacy of colonialism as they strive for progress and unity. The African Union, established in 2002, represents a collective effort to address the challenges and opportunities facing the continent. It is a testament to the enduring spirit of Africa and its people. As Africa moves forward, it does so with a deep awareness of its past. The story of the Berlin Conference is a reminder of the resilience and strength of the African continent and its people. What led to this sudden interest in Africa? Several factors came into play. The Industrial Revolution had created a huge demand for raw materials. Africa, with its vast resources of rubber, diamonds and gold, became an attractive target. Moreover, the decline of the Ottoman Empire had left a power vacuum in North Africa. European powers saw an opportunity to expand their influence. Adding to this was a sense of competition among European nations. Each country feared being left behind in the race for colonies.
Germany was a latecomer to the colonial game. I hope to use the conference to secure German colonies while preventing conflict among the other European powers.
Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany, hosted the Berlin Conference. Bismarck's motives were complex. 14 nations attended the conference, including Britain, France, Germany, Portugal and Belgium. Notably absent were any African representatives. The conference proceeded to carve up Africa with little regard for the people who lived there. The Berlin Conference established a set of rules for the colonization of Africa. One key principle was effective occupation. This meant that a European power could claim a territory only if it had established an effective administration there. Another important rule concerned the navigation of Africa's major rivers, the Congo and the Niger. The conference declared these rivers open to free trade. However, this freedom was often exploited by European companies who used their superior firepower to dominate trade.
Section 5. The Congo Free State, a cruel paradox. The Congo Free State, established in the late 19th century, was a vast territory in Central Africa that became infamous for its brutal exploitation and inhumane treatment of the local population. This chapter delves into the dark history of this region, shedding light on the atrocities committed under colonial rule. The most notorious example of colonial brutality was the Congo Free State. Established by King Leopold II of Belgium, this territory was not just a colony, but his personal property. The exploitation and cruelty that took place here were unparalleled, making it a grim chapter in the history of colonialism.
This vast territory, covering much of present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, was personally owned by King Leopold II of Belgium. Leopold's rule was marked by extreme exploitation, where the primary goal was to extract as much wealth as possible, particularly through the rubber trade. The local population was subjected to horrific conditions to meet the insatiable demand for rubber.
Under my rule, the Congo became a byword for exploitation and cruelty. The methods employed to extract rubber were ruthless, involving forced labor, severe punishments, and a complete disregard for human life. The Congolese people were treated as mere tools for economic gain, leading to widespread suffering and death.
Millions of Congolese died from forced labor, disease, and starvation. The harsh working conditions, lack of adequate food, and rampant diseases decimated the population. Families were torn apart and entire communities were destroyed in the relentless pursuit of profit. The human cost of Leopold's regime was staggering, with estimates of the death toll reaching into the millions. Leopold's regime used barbaric methods to enforce rubber quotas, including the amputation of hands for those who failed to meet their targets. This gruesome practice was intended to instill fear and ensure compliance, but it also highlighted the extreme brutality of the colonial administration. The sight of mutilated individuals became a common and horrifying aspect of life in the Congo Free State.
The Congo Free State stands as a chilling reminder of the dark side of colonialism. It serves as a stark example of how the quest for wealth and power can lead to unimaginable suffering and devastation. The legacy of this period continues to haunt the region, and it is a somber testament to the human capacity for cruelty when driven by greed. The story of the Congo Free State is a crucial chapter in understanding the broader impacts of colonialism and the enduring scars it has left on the world.
Section 6. Dividing the spoils. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 was a pivotal moment in the history of Africa. It marked the beginning of a new era of colonialism, where European powers convened to lay down the rules for the division of African territories. This conference, held in Berlin, was attended by representatives from major European nations, all eager to expand their empires. The Berlin Conference had unleashed a scramble for African territories. The European powers, driven by economic interests and a desire for global dominance, carved up the continent with little regard for existing African cultures and societies. The arbitrary borders drawn during this period would have lasting impacts on the continent. By 1914, only Ethiopia and Liberia remained independent. These two nations managed to resist colonization through a combination of diplomacy, military resistance, and strategic alliances. Ethiopia, under the leadership of Emperor Menelik II, famously defeated the Italian forces at the Battle of Adiwa in 1896, securing its sovereignty. Britain, with its vast empire, emerged as the dominant colonial power in Africa. British colonies included Egypt, Sudan, Kenya, and South Africa. The British Empire's influence extended across the continent, from the Mediterranean to the Cape of Good Hope. Their control over these territories was maintained through a combination of military force, economic exploitation, and administrative governance. France controlled much of North and West Africa. French colonial rule was characterized by a policy of assimilation, where they sought to impose French culture and language on the colonized peoples. This approach led to the establishment of French as a dominant language in many African countries, a legacy that persists to this day. Germany acquired colonies in East and Southwest Africa, including present-day Tanzania, Namibia, and Cameroon. German colonial rule was often harsh and exploitative, leading to significant resistance from the local populations. The Herero and Namakwa genocide in Namibia is a stark example of the brutality of German colonialism, while Portugal held on to Angola and Mozambique. Portuguese colonialism in Africa was marked by a long-lasting presence, with their control over these territories lasting well into the 20th century. The Portuguese employed a policy of direct rule, maintaining tight control over the administration and economy of their colonies. Belgium, after the atrocities of the Congo Free State, was forced to hand over control of the territory to the Belgian government. The Congo Free State, under the personal rule of King Leopold II, was the site of widespread human rights abuses and exploitation. The international outcry over these atrocities led to the Belgian government taking over the administration of the Congo in 1908, marking the end of one of the darkest chapters in colonial history. Section 7. The Scramble's Toll. The scramble for Africa had a devastating impact on the continent. European powers imposed their own systems of government, law, and education. They exploited Africa's resources for their own benefit while ignoring the needs of the local population.
Traditional African societies were disrupted and their cultures undermined. The arbitrary borders drawn by European powers divided ethnic groups and created the conditions for future conflict.
Section 8. A legacy of division. The legacy of the Berlin Conference continued to be felt long after the end of colonialism. The artificial borders created in Berlin became the boundaries of independent African states. This has led to numerous territorial disputes and ethnic conflicts.
The economic exploitation of the colonial era left many African countries impoverished and dependent on their former rulers. The challenges of overcoming this legacy remain a major obstacle to development in many parts of Africa.
Section 9. Africa's future. Despite the challenges, Africa has made significant progress since independence. Many African countries have experienced economic growth and democratic reforms. There is a growing sense of optimism about Africa's future.
However, the legacy of the Berlin Conference continues to cast a long shadow. It is a reminder of the dangers of colonialism and the importance of respecting the sovereignty of all nations. As Africa moves forward, it must confront the challenges of its past while embracing the opportunities of the future.